Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, powered by Brady. This is your front row seat to the stories of local leaders, both nonprofit and for-profit, who are shaping our community. Every episode brings you leadership insights, lessons from challenges, and practical strategies you can use today. And yes, we'll keep it real and have some fun along the way. If you're ready to elevate your leadership, hit subscribe and follow us on LinkedIn for updates and behind-the-scenes content. Now, let's dive in. Hey everybody, Jason Old here with another episode of the Elevate Podcast. This one I'm excited for because I'm a bit of a baseball junkie and a baseball geek from old times. In fact, if you're in the studio here, I've got a bat that I got signed by Pete Rose, and it was a lot of fun getting a chance to meet him. But I'll tell you, the person that's here with me has been around baseball basically his whole life, right? And so I was super excited to have Randy Lewandowski with me from the Indians. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Thank you, Jason.
And so before we get started, going back through your story and kind of the genesis of how you get into baseball and those things. You've been in baseball for a long time, I think around 30 years with the Indians, is that right?
My 33rd season coming up here in 2026.
There you go, 33 years. So I'm curious, maybe some of the coolest players you've had a chance to interact with over the last 33 years. Name drop a little bit.
I'll have some recency bias, but Paul Skeens is the first one that jumps to mind. He was only with us a short time in 2024, but the fact of what he's been in basically 2 years in the major leagues, to interact briefly, but you just knew how polished and how good he was going to be, both as a pitcher, but as a person. And he has the ability to lift up the Pirates franchise because of his ability both on the mound, but also as a leader and how he's going to shape that franchise. So that was really cool.
Okay.
Staying with the Pirates, Andrew McCutcheon. There's a long, funny story, but I had to shuttle him back and forth. He was a 21-year-old from a small town in Florida, and he's in a big city. And just to interact with the 21-year-old, I think at the time I was 35 or 36. We didn't have a whole lot in common, but it was interesting to spend some time with him. He's not going to remember that, but I certainly did have a straight vehicle and shuttle him around a couple times. We've done some cool things where we've brought in some former major leaguers, Hall of Famers to sign autographs. I think in the Indianapolis market, a name that really resonates is Ryne Sandberg. He came in both as one of these autograph folks that we brought in, but he also managed Lehigh Valley. He was a Philadelphia Phillies AAA affiliate, and to interact with him was cool. And he's just like Wichita. He was just calm, cool, collected like he was as a player, just chill. And so I got to interact with him. One is we brought him as a paid autographer, but we also got to interact with him as a visiting manager. So you got to see both sides of that. He wasn't really any different. That's what was kind of cool.
And that's really
and so Ryne Sandberg, I'm not a Cubs fan, but there are so many Cubs fans, of course, in this area that he certainly sticks out. One more other Cub, and then we get on with this thing and get off the name dropping. Lee Smith. So he's a big, intimidating guy.
Yeah.
And he was, even when we walked in to meet him in our conference room, he was signing baseballs for our staff and doing those other things before he had him go out and meet the fans. But a gentle giant.
Yeah.
And to just talk with him and hear the stories, how maybe I shouldn't say this, but he used to, Cubs back in his day played all day games. He would go and play basketball, unbeknownst to the Cubs front office.
No kidding?
On the streets of Chicago, along Lake Shore.
No kidding.
Pretty cool.
I actually have a little story about him, right? So I remember watching him as a kid, warming up in the bullpens at Wrigley. He's right-handed pitcher, and he'd come set, pull his leg up. And I remember just looking at his legs as a little kid going, oh my gosh, this guy's legs are bigger than I am.
Oh yeah.
He was just a huge dude.
His hands were nasty.
Huge. Yeah, interesting. I had no idea that he was playing basketball in the evenings.
And of all these people that I've mentioned, the one thing if you ever want to judge somebody if they're going to make it to the major leagues, check their hands. These hands were not going to get me to the major leagues. Big, strong hands is what is almost a tell. No kidding. Even Ken Griffey Sr., who's not, he's 6'6", he's not a massive man. Mia Cleavers for hands. Meat cleaver Josh. It's just to handle a bat, mostly for hitters and things like that. Pitchers is long fingers, but yeah, it's some of the nuances that you pick up over time. That was a trait and or characteristic that I'd noticed with some of the best hitters that have ever come through.
No kids.
Wade Ball's even have really shown it.
No kidding. Yeah. All right. Awesome. I'll tell you, I'm so excited for this interview and in this conversation. So let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from?
I was born in Chicago, in a suburb called, it was a little suburb called Schaumburg. It's not a little suburb anymore. Moved to Fort Wayne when I was about 10 years old, and then I lived in Indy since I started my career when I was 24. So I said I was born in Chicago, grew up in Fort Wayne, my formative years, and I live in it.
Gotcha. All right. So in Fort Wayne, going to high school, Bishop going areas, right? So athlete in high school?
I guess.
A little bit, right? Playing all the sports, just baseball? What were you doing?
I was a basketball player and a baseball player. You know, Fort Wayne, I was a public school kid through 8th grade, made the transition to the Catholic high school. And Catholic high schools are known for football.
Yep.
I did play football and was a quarterback in the middle school. And I remember after I enrolled at Dwenger, and I wouldn't say that I wasn't recruited. Like if people think that's a thing, in Fort Wayne it wasn't, at least back in the mid 80s. My dad had some interest in me going there. There were some sports related reasons. There was, Christ-centered reasons and some other things from a faith perspective. But I remember getting the phone call when I didn't show up for football practice. I don't know if they just assumed or had done some background check. Yeah, sure. Football was not anything that had ever really interested me very much.
Okay.
But I was a quarterback. I am left-handed, and I was at the time. I'm 6'3" now. I probably was around that, because a freshman in high school. So I didn't play football, and just told me that I wasn't interested, and then tried out for the basketball team. And that was a unique situation when you made that change from 8th and 9th grade. You got your buddies in 8th grade. Most of my buddies ended up going to Northrop High School in Fort Wayne. And then I walked into Dwenger, and I probably knew 3 or 4 people total.
Okay.
And so had to kind of prove yourself again. Sharing that started with basketball, and then certainly as I got into baseball. I was a better baseball player than I was as a basketball player, but I probably in high school have more fond memories of basketball.
Really?
For whatever reason, yes.
So, Indiana basketball. I mean, it's a great place to be. I played at Dwenger, was fun. You guys were, if I remember correctly, you were playing like Twisted Sister before games. Did you play like We're Not Gonna Take It or something like that before games come?
I'm certain. Yeah, fan was really good.
Yeah, they were crazy. I remember, being there for years after you. So high school, basketball, baseball, going into the next part of your career, next part of your life, going to college. Where do you end up going?
Was a recruited walk-on to Indiana University to play baseball.
Okay.
After about a semester, I realized that wasn't a great cultural fit for me.
Yep.
And at that point in time, I thought I was just going to be a student. I put on the freshman 15 plus 10 in that spring semester. I gained a lot of weight. Ate a lot of delivery food and pizza. And I went home one weekend, and my dad looked at me and said, "So you're really not going to play baseball anymore?" And just had one of those conversations with your dad and your mom and your parents and as a family, and thought I should probably continue to pursue it once you get past the disappointment of how I just didn't fit and or work out at IU. And it wasn't a talent thing. I don't mean that to be braggadocious. It wasn't a good fit. It's the first time I really didn't like playing baseball was when I was down there. And there was just a myriad of reasons, but and some were my own and some were just in how the program and things were put together. But I remember being recruited very heavily by Coach Don Brandon at Anderson University, well-regarded program. But when you're coming out of high school, it was true back in the 80s. It's probably still true today. Most kids that are playing a high school sport, all they think about is D1, D1, D1.
That's right, yeah.
And I had poo-pooed Anderson and thought it was going to be D1. But I remember Coach Brandon loved the way he approached everything. And when I reached out to him, he was ecstatic to hear from me and opened his arms and welcomed me. And so went through that transition from IU to Anderson and ended up playing 4 very good seasons and great life lessons at AU, proud AU graduate, and culminated we were NAI when I went there, a lot of shifts and change in the collegiate sports world. We were Division III NCAA my senior year, and probably, I say this, it was I don't know how many games we won in my 4 years when I was there, but it was darn close to 200. We played a lot of games, and no kidding, yes, wow. Had very talented teams my freshman, sophomore, and junior years. Probably a little less talented my senior year, but as we made the transition to Division III, the setup of the tournament was a little different. But we went to the College World Series, the Division III World Series. In NAI, as I said, we probably had more talented teams. We couldn't get over a hump. We were better. It was one of my first lessons in teamwork, leadership, and just other things that when you play for one another, not just with one another, there's a difference. Yeah. And that was epitomized by that team that we had in 1993 at Anderson University. Finished fifth in the country, and had a really good team and a lot of good teammates and a lot of great members.
No kidding. All right. So a couple of questions there about college before we move on to what comes next. What were you studying in school?
Business management.
Okay. And so as you're thinking through what's going to come next, what were your thoughts as a college kid? Where were you thinking you were going to go?
That I might get drafted. But you might get drafted, everybody else, and then you learn really quickly when you can't run and you don't throw very hard. The game's going to tell you when the game is done with you.
Left-handed player.
Yeah.
Left-handed pitcher.
Yes. Did pitch, yeah. In high school, I pitched a ton. My arm fell off.
Yep.
In college, I just didn't throw very hard.
Yep.
And in high school, that worked. There were some other things that happened over the years where I lost some movement on my fastball, if it was a fastball. Did develop a good changeup. I did. I ended up being a closer in college.
Okay.
My overall ERA numbers aren't very good, but I could pitch in clutch situations and get some key guys out.
Yep.
But ultimately, I was an outfielder in high school. Again, that running thing caught up with me when I got to college. Had never played much first base, maybe in a little league, well, 10, 11, 12. But moved into the infield, and that's a big change when you're 280, 300 feet away, and then you move 90 to 100 feet away.
So obviously, like any kid, you hope you're going to get drafted. You get through your 4 years, and you realize maybe that's not going to happen at some point.
Learned that pretty quick.
Okay, learned that pretty quick in college. All right, so you get humbled a little bit. Finish up school. You got your degree. Where do you go next?
Yeah, it was a business degree, and it was management. I wasn't sure. I always thought I wanted to work in sports. Now, this goes back 30 plus years. There were only a couple sport management programs in the entire country. Ohio U being the best. There was one in UMass Springfield and another place. So I thought about going to my master's at some point in time. I went back to Fort Wayne, moved in with mom and dad. I was fortunate enough to have a brother-in-law that had a retail business up in Fort Wayne, and I had worked there during some summers and some other stuff. So I plugged in there. They had an employee get ill and needed someone to manage one of their retail outlets, so I did. And I learned really quick that retail is probably not what I wanted to do, but there were some lessons to be learned there. I ran into an old teammate of mine while I was in Fort Wayne, and he had told me he'd done an internship with the Indianapolis Indians. And that kind of then you start putting some pieces together, the puzzle, and you send in your resume and you try to do some networking. And even though networking then is much different than networking is now, it's writing letters and trying to dial people up on a phone way back then. But yeah, there's some interesting stories about that. But that was the genesis of it. I always wanted to work in sports. I always thought it would be as a general manager, trading for players, free agency, like a real general manager of a professional major league sports team. Yeah, not ultimately what I ended up doing, but that's how it kind of morphed and worked its way into it.
But sports were always a big part of everything, and you thought, okay, this is where I'm going to go.
It's how I learned math.
It's how I learned math.
Box scores. I do 2 for 7. I was 286. I mean, I studied the box scores every morning eating my cereal. And that's what I loved and where it all came from. And I remember, I grew up a White Sox fan, but I remember my first game was at Wrigley Field. And I remember if Wrigley, still being Wrigley, you walk out of the concourse up to the vomitory, and I still can remember the sights and the smells and the sounds.
Yeah.
And that just grabbed me. Yeah. I mean, even to the point where I get into the neighborhood and you can just sense that a stadium or a ballpark is near. Yeah. And that's just something that grabbed me as a kid for whatever reason.
Were your parents athletes too?
Well, my dad was a good basketball player.
Okay.
He had a situation where he had to go to work instead of going to college. He had some opportunities to play. I think it was Murray State or something like that way back in the.
Okay.
I guess it would have been the '60s. But yeah, my mom and dad grew up in the inner city of Chicago, and they're both Polish, and they grew up in the Polish neighborhood. And my dad played some basketball, so we had that. Had a grandpa. My dad's dad was very supportive of my athletic pursuits and things like that. It just was something that was always around. My dad, this can really get off page, but my dad worked in the soda industry.
Okay. Yeah.
He worked for 7-Up in Chicago. And back in those days, professional athletes needed to have a second job or have a real job in the office. And for whatever reason, hockey players gravitated to the beverage industry, either beer or soda pop.
Okay.
And my dad, there was a group of Chicago Blackhawks players that worked for him at 7-Up in Chicago. And I would tell you, I am a diehard Chicago Blackhawks fan because of those relationships. My dad used to play cards with some of the players, and they got to know their wives just because he was their employer.
Yeah.
And so you add that together, being around it, always playing on the driveway, we had a basketball hoop. I mean, it just became second nature.
Gotcha. All right. So you're still in Fort Wayne. Yep. Working retail. You find out that one of your friends, had done some things with the Indians. How do you cold call? You're making writing some email, or write some letters out. Okay.
It was letters.
Right. How do you end up getting down here and finding this job?
So heard about an intern. Well, it was a pseudo internship program. Sent in my resume. There was our sports medicine director, Anderson. Would have told me somehow, some way that he knew Max Schumacher, who at the time was I don't know what Max's title was back then, but he was the guy.
Okay.
With the Indianapolis Indians. And somehow, Doc Reisinger is this fella's name at AU, had worked for the Bears in their spring or their summer training camp. And somehow, some way, also through baseball connections, either I was the Pan Am games in the late 80s, but somehow had run across Max Schumacher. So he on just his bubble at Anderson University running sports ed program, he had done some other things in the summers and had gone on sabbatical, but he had connections. And he heard that, hey, I might be interested in the Indianapolis Indians. He said, well, I can at least call down to Max Schumacher. So did it get me the job? No, but it's a lesson for everybody that when you start making connections, when there's a stack of resumes, how do you get moved up near the top of the pile so they at least read it? Sure. And then just being persistent with phone calls about asking, getting an interview, and referencing the guy that I had played college baseball with, that he had previously worked there, and all that other kind of stuff, and was fortunate enough to get an interview, and even more fortunate enough to get an opportunity. I just told our intern class for 2026 started today, that they were taping this. And I told them this story. They talked about what were, one of the questions was what was one of the most transformational changes. And I said technology. Because when I started in 1994, we didn't have a computerized ticket system. Everything was done by hand. We didn't have voicemail. I worked on our box office. So we called them racking games, and you put them in this rack, seat or section, row, seat in order. Everything was with cash, very little credit card transactions. Answered was basically the switchboard, being two other guys with a switchboard. And when Max, or at the time our assistant general manager, Cal Burles, if they weren't in or aimed, there were only 7 full-time employees, and then there were 3 or 4 interns.
No kidding.
Yes. We hand wrote messages, put them on a hook, and when people came in, we were on a different level at Busch Stadium, the old place on 16th Street. Fascinating. Learning the business literally from the ground up.
Yeah.
Cash, racking tickets, handwritten phone messages. Talked about Feller because he called to talk to Max Schumacher.
No kidding.
Yeah, I said, no, Dad. I called Mom and Dad to say, I talked about her. That's cool. Did I talk to him? No, he asked for Max, so he's not of it. It's one of those things. But you learned, very remedial, but what made it work for me, and what you tell any of your group of interns or anybody that wants to get into the sports business, it sounds cool. Yeah, it is, and it can be.
Sure.
But it's still hard work.
Yeah.
And we're not rocket scientists, but we work really hard. We put in tons of hours, and it's a lifestyle business. And I got jazzed up when the lights came on. Not because they were shined on me, that's for the players.
Yeah.
But to be behind the scenes and put on events just energized me, got me going. and it still does to this day. And that's why I wanted to continue on, even after having to clean the stadium after a game or pull the tarp or where all the horrible jobs that you have to do when you're young, just getting your foot in the door. It got me excited, and I wanted to continue.
No kid. So you've literally done all the jobs. You've seen from 1994 till now 2026. All right. So you're working that role. How do you continue to navigate what comes next? Because obviously now as the president and CEO, sure, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like for you. But where do you go next before you get between here and now?
Well, after that 1994 season, I wasn't sure if they were going to continue to have interns. There was some talk of this new ballpark that might get built downtown. And that ended up being the big break. I remember being at the baseball winter meetings in December of 1994. I had a couple opportunities to get entry-level jobs, full-time jobs that didn't pay very much money. But there was East Coast, middle of the country, West Coast.
Okay.
Been a Midwest guy. I told you I was born in Chicago, grew up in Fort Wayne, and I lived in Indy. And that just didn't float my boat. And I remember calling back to my boss at the time in Indy and said, hey, there's this talk of a new ballpark. Well, there's no guarantee, Randy, but we will probably have some interns in 95. If you want to roll the dice, we'll know that in a couple of weeks. And if we do, we have you back. So I rolled those dice and came back for a second internship in 95. I wouldn't say that it was any more glamorous than it was in 94, but it was a building block. And then, I don't want to say the rest is history, but Victory Field with lots of hoops and hurdles got built. And that was the break for me. And it ended up being 6 other, those guys at the time where the Indian staff doubled from 7 to 14. And that's really then where we took off. And I got a job in our box office as we transitioned from Busch Stadium to Victory Field.
That change from Busch Stadium to Victory Field, doubling the number of employees. Why'd you guys have to add so many people when really you just changed the venue? For me, it's trying to understand the background.
Bigger, more sophisticated, newer, nicer. Busch Stadium was nostalgic, and it was a mini Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
It was not in great shape. That was one of the reasons why we wanted and needed to leave, because there was just a bunch of deferred maintenance. And we had switched to Ticketmaster. And so that was
some more carrot tickets.
And that was a big deal, right? And it just was, there's just going to be a bigger operation. The other thing I tell people is we had to teach people, this is going to sound crazy, Jason. We had to teach people in the Indianapolis market to buy a baseball ticket to come watch the Indianapolis Indians. The model at Busch Stadium was a little bit of reverse marketing. We would do these corporate buyouts, and let's just say Braden Business Systems would buy for $4,000. They would get 30,000 general admission tickets, and then they would spread them out across their footprint. And you hope people would grab those GA tickets and come down and maybe turn that into a box seat for a couple extra bucks and maybe buy a beer or a hot dog. Yeah, that was the model of Busch Stadium. And then we had season ticket holders, but at scale, it was these big depth buyout nights. UAW, AFL, CIO, those were the board of realtors. Those are the 3 that I remember that stick out, that they were going to be big nights.
Gotcha.
Because they had big memberships.
Yeah.
Right? When they could distribute all those free tickets. But we moved to Victory Field. We couldn't do that anymore, right? We had to justify, we had to pay rent. There was debt to pay off. There were all those things that you reduce, so we had to reverse the model. And so it just became, you just needed more manpower.
Yeah.
And we at Busch Stadium, we didn't run the facility. At Victory Field, the way the deal was set up smartly by Max Schumacher was that we were then going to repair and maintain the facility. And we'd never done that before. So we had to expand a bit of a facility staff and do things that we'd never done before. It was at Busch Stadium, we had a promotions guy, we had a PR guy, we had a sales guy, and we took orders. And everybody then was responsible to sell season tickets or packages. And we just we started to become a little bit more specialized as we moved to Victory Field. And now, circa 30 years down the road, because we're going to celebrate our 30th anniversary of Victory Field in 2026, we're up to 64 full-time employees.
Suddenly.
And the world is just more specialized, and it's because of technology.
Yeah, sure, of course. All right. So when did you take over as president CEO? How long have you been in this role?
CEO, this will be my 3rd season as a CEO. President, I think, was in 2017. General manager, 2013 or 14. I was an assistant GM for a really long time. from the mid 2000s up to that 2013, 2014. So as you work backwards, that's about how it stair steps back.
Gotcha. All right. So now lots of changes over the last 30 years. You mentioned some technology. Maybe, obviously, I think people know the Indianapolis Indians, and right? People know baseball, those types of things. But from a business perspective, you're up to 64 individuals now. You're the CEO. What's your role look like? How are you working with the team? You mentioned bringing out some interns in, those types of things. What's it look like for you?
If I could boil it down to one sentence, it's hopefully to provide the necessary resources for the organization and our team to be able to execute our plans.
Yep.
I mean, that's to boil it down.
Sure.
That's to be able to provide our group with, the resources is talent. It's certainly dollars. It's the time, it's the opportunities that we open doors that we can go be successful and operate a business. That's a long way from where we used to be. When we were at Busch Stadium and even moved in, it was rubbing nickels together to keep the lights on. We had a great streak of from 1975 to 2020 being profitable. That was back in those 70s and 80s. That was tough in minor league baseball to do. 2020 pandemic we did play, so the streak stops. But that was just, that's some of the genesis of really how that's all come together.
Gotcha. All right. So some questions just about, Major League Baseball and how you guys operate amongst the greater national base shirts. AAA, currently an affiliate of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So what's that mean? How do you fit into the ecosystem? Because I don't know if a lot of folks understand Major League Baseball and the tiers and the levels and those things. What do you guys feel?
It's a great question. To talk about the tiers, there are currently 4 levels of baseball. There is single A, high single A, double A, and triple A. There used to be, prior to 2020, unrelated to the pandemic, but it fits because there was a contractual thing. There used to be some rookie leagues and some other leagues that were then moved away. So the way it used to be said, there's 4 leagues, and you would typically, if you got drafted, you start in that rookie league or that single A, and then basically every year you're moving up a level. And you may pause or delay and spend an extra year in double A or triple A, or you get released or you get traded and you work your way up. Baseball's the hardest game to play. There's such nuance to it. It's the only game when the defense has the ball, start the possession. If you think about that, the pitcher makes it very challenging from just that perspective. And the guys in the major leagues are so good that even between AAA and our guys are really, really good. And most of the guys on our roster have been in or will be in the big leagues at some point. Most, not all. But if you think about it, I think there's still only been just over 20,000 or 22,000 people that have ever played in major leagues.
Yeah.
Ever?
Think about that. Yeah.
So there's nuance, but you would work your way through that. On the business side of things, so that's the baseball. There's those levels, and people within the major league organizations make the determination of where guys are going to be and where they should slot and how they move during the course of the year between year to year. That's a thing that we or any other minor league baseball team, we don't do. We don't get to do player evaluation, player movement. So we run the business, and in most cases run our facility. So it's a weird, crazy, unique business model, but our product is the baseball game, and that's the one thing we probably have very little to no control over are the baseball players.
So the players that show up in Indianapolis, they're assigned by Pittsburgh,
and they're paid by Pittsburgh. And they're paid by Pittsburgh Pirates and Boys.
So you're actually creating the venue, the opportunity, the space, bringing the fans.
Yes.
But the team on the field, I had no idea. I actually caught the responsibility. You guys were out working, players around, but it's really Pittsburgh's judging that, and who you get is who you have.
Yeah, and that has morphed over the years. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, there were lots of instances, or most cases, the instance of players were signed to contracts by the minor league team directly, and then if Jason was having a great year and the Chicago White Sox came calling, your contract might get sold to the White Sox. You go to the big, lots of things. That changed at some point in the late 80s, early 90s, where the major league clubs wanted more control. And then I can get to this, talking about more control, not even on the player side, but on the business side. Minor league baseball, we used to be a membership of 160 clubs. And we fed into leagues, who then fed into a national association that was based in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'll speed this up. That association had a contract with Major League Baseball.
Okay.
And that they would provide the affiliates that the Major League teams could then provide. And we had a contract with the Major League team the last 2 or 4 years. It got a little hairy. There was a lot of movement. And anyway, Major League Baseball, I would say that contract ended at the end of 2019. Going into 2020, there was no baseball because of the pandemic, but the contract lapsed and a new system was put in place called the PDL, Professional Development Leagues. So while we used to have an association that had a contract with Major League Baseball, we now, all minor league, now there's 120 clubs. Those rookie league teams went away. There are now 120 clubs that have a license agreement directly with Major League Baseball. And then Major League Baseball figures out those affiliate assignments.
Gotcha.
And so now minor league baseball is now under the Major League Baseball umbrella directly. That didn't used to be the case. So we're in the 5th year of that, going into the 6th season. I guess this is the 5th season of it. So we're halfway through the first of a 10-year deal. It's been different. There's a baseball ops side with Major League Baseball, and then there's a business ops side. And there's been some nuances and some things that we've all had to adjust and adapt. Some good, some not so good. But at the end of the day, it's a much more stable business than it ever has been. And some of that is because of our current structure.
That's interesting. I guess I didn't know that. I knew a few things.
And I just read that with version. There is lots of nuance and there was sure else, but that's trying to speed it up for your viewers and everybody else. But it was a seismic change for all of us operators on the minor league side going into 21, also coming out of COVID with all these restrictions. It was helpful that we did have Major League Baseball leading the way on that because of all the crazy rules and distancing and just to get the players to play in 21 was a Herculean feat. But as we've gotten into it and now we've operated as we've come out of all that, the baseball side certainly runs really smooth. There's still always some rubs on the business side, but there's always going to be when you got someone nationally trying to come in locally to do some things and affect your business. But it's been good overall.
Yeah, it's great. You know, the stadium is beautiful. In fact, it's a great place to go watch a game, right? And so if you're not a huge baseball fan, it's a great place to take your family. So it's a good opportunity.
And I mean, we don't say this with a ton of great pride, but a lot of people, when they leave an Indianapolis Indians game or any other minor league baseball game, they may not really know who won.
Yep.
They're there for the social aspect, the ambiance, the comfort, the fun, the on-field promotions, whatever else we're doing to bring somebody in. I mentioned, we brought in a Leaf Claire August. There's all the cartoon characters, and we theme our days with concession deals and all of that. And we build our experience around that memory making. And whether it's a date night, it's a family night, it's a corporate outing, we've got a little bit of something for everybody, and that's what we build it on. And we do talk about players. Certainly when we have Paul Skeens, we want to talk about Paul Skeens. But we can't guarantee how long he's going to be with us. And so you'll rarely see anybody like that of a name on a billboard or any of our advertising. You'll see players, but it's more about then the family aspect and everything else. And that's what we build it around. And it's around Victory Field and the experience and making those memories and being affordable and memorable family fun. And that's been our tagline since we've been at Victory Field for 29 years going into 30. It's awesome.
Love it. So we mentioned a little technology, knowing that you started back in 94 doing everything by hand, right? Technology's everywhere today. We're talking about AI and all these different things, right? So with inside your business, how is technology are you seeing technology help you reach fans differently? What are you guys using? What are you seeing? And where do you think maybe things might go?
Where it might go, who knows? I mean, AI is going to play a huge role in that, just how you can automate or it helps make especially our salespeople more efficient, our frontline people if you come to our website, there's a chat box. Yeah, that's a chat. Right. I mean, so, and it can handle some of those questions because I had this in 1994 beyond. If we have a game tonight and it's cloudy and it looks like it might rain, do you have any phone calls and now thankfully for social media where we can push message, but it's those kinds of things that are just rinse and repeat, we can automate. That's simple. But really, when it comes to ag, we don't know where it's going to go, but we're generating most of our own content, how we generate our leads, how we follow through on those sales and sequence those kinds of things. Everybody here that's listening, you should know you're getting sequenced emails because every database and CRM is going to do those kinds of things.
Yep.
But it just makes everybody more efficient. Sure. And when you're selling baseball, it's a lot better than selling widgets or vacuum cleaners or anything else. And rarely do you either get hung up on or deleted. A lot of times people will engage because it's a fun experience that people tend to have. Most everybody has a very fond memory if they've been to Victory Field that they had a good, pleasant, fun experience. So we want all that together. But from a tech standpoint, we're trying to stay on top of it. It's why our staff has grown. If you'd have told me way back in the day that we would have somebody just dealing with social media and someone with just with email and just with a website, but it's that those are our front doors.
Yep.
That's how we introduce ourselves to customers and how we interact with our fans. And you have to be on top of that. And you've got to, and it's ever changing, as everybody knows the technology. Even we used to have fun.
Yeah. You guys are in the people business, creating experiences. Right. The end product happens to be baseball.
Yeah.
But it's an experience business, and you're talking to people on a daily basis. That's awesome. Let's talk a little community.
Sure.
Right? Because you guys are a big part of our community in Indianapolis. And when you think about community, it's your 64 individuals. It's the community when they come into your stadium, but it's also the folks around the stadium and our friends and neighbors. What's community look like for the Indianapolis Indians, and how are you guys engaging?
Well, there's a couple things. We like to consider Victory Field as Indianapolis's largest and best outdoor gathering space. So certainly downtown, right? Community, bringing people together, all walks of life, just come to have a good time, leave their worries at the door, come on in, have a good time. So community from that perspective. Yeah. We've been around since 1902. We are Indy's original home team. You'll see that as that rolls out in 2026 and beyond. We're going to lean heavily into that. That's not knocking any other sports teams. We've just been around longer. It is, and it's been around. Yeah. There's been professional baseball in Indianapolis since 1887, but as our franchise is constituted, 1902 is what our historical records date back to. So we're going to lean heavily into that. So if you've been around that long, you're woven within the fabric of the community, sure, for 124 years. It's our 124th season. So big part of that. We've just gone through an internal strategic plan operation, and we heard, and most of that was interviewing our staff, and a big piece of that was people culture, but also was community and how we want to invest in the community, be a part of the community. And with that as well, in 2019, we introduced Indianapolis Indians Charities, which is our charitable arm, which is focused on giving back to the community. So you bring all that together, it's huge in what we do. It's how we get to touch people. That's how Rowdy, our mascot, helps keep us top of mind. This time of year, when there's snow on the ground or whatever else is happening, he's still out at schools. He's still at parades. He's still doing all other kinds of, he's not doing parades now, but he's out about doing all kinds of things in the community.
Yeah.
And that ends up becoming a sales tool as well. And but it's genuine with what we want to do. We want to give back. We want to be a part of it. We want to make Indianapolis and Central Indiana a better place to live, work, and play, and to be an amenity to people. People are going to come root us on. Hopefully they do to a championship, but it's not like the NBA Finals or the Super Bowl. But to come in and enjoy what Indianapolis has to offer and what Victory Field has to offer, and how we interact with people and how we can give back both financially, but also with our time and with our talents, with our staff and how we volunteered, who we partner with through our charitable foundation. Those are all, that's being a good citizen, and we want our organization to be that, and we have been. We want to continue to strengthen that.
Well, not many people can say they've been doing it since the 1800s, and in 1902 documented. And so, we've talked community, we've talked baseball, we've talked all those things. Let's talk a little bit of fun.
Okay.
Right? So if you're not working and you're not at an Indians game, what's fun? What are you doing?
Well, before I got a little old, I consider myself a retired adult recreational hockey player. I loved it. I got beat up and banged up a little bit. I wasn't very good. I still had the hand-eye coordination from being a baseball player, but sure, I skated like I ran, which wasn't very well. But really enjoyed that. I went in and never really played. I'd never played organized hockey. I'd pick up on a pond, but I went in with my best buddy from college, and we would go do the stick and puck at a local ice rink, and there was a flyer about, hey, join a league, and we looked at each other and said, let's do it. And that was scary. Then you had to put the equipment on, and you learn how to do that. You get out there, and you just learn, and it was a lot of fun. So I did that. Oh, I'm retired. Currently now is boating.
Okay.
My wife and I live up on Morris Reservoir, and that's something that when we get a free moment, I work in the summer. You might have a lot of baseball games. But when we do get a free moment, whether it's with friends or with family or just the two of us, that has become our go-to and something that we try to get out on the water as much as we can.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Randy, great story. Cool to hear about the Indians. And again, in the experience business, creating experiences for families and creating opportunities for Indianapolis. Thanks for your story. Thanks for being on the show.
You bet. Appreciate it very much and enjoy getting to know you. And it's been a pleasure to be on with you.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.